What did the drivers have to say after the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series race at New Hampshire? The race delivered the kind of action fans expect from NASCAR. Intense battles, changing track conditions, strategic decisions, hard racing, and plenty of emotions after the checkered flag. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're looking at the biggest post-race reactions from New Hampshire Motor Speedway and what the drivers had to say after one of the most demanding races of the season. New Hampshire is a unique challenge on the NASCAR schedule. The track is known for its flat layout, long green flag runs, limited banking, and the way small mistakes can quickly become major problems. Drivers have to be patient. But at the same time, they need to be aggressive when an opportunity appears. From the opening laps, it was clear that this wasn't going to be an easy afternoon. The field settled into position early, but the drivers quickly discovered that passing wasn't simple. Cars could run close together, but finding the right lane and maintaining grip over a long run became one of the biggest challenges. For the drivers at the front, every restart was an opportunity. For those fighting through the middle of the pack, every lap was a battle. And for the teams trying to manage tires, fuel, and track position, the race became a giant strategic puzzle. After the race, one of the biggest topics was tire management. Several drivers talked about how dramatically the car could change during a run. A car that felt strong at the beginning of a stint could become much more difficult to handle after several laps. That meant drivers had to think beyond the next corner. They had to protect their tires. They had to manage their brakes. And most importantly, they had to avoid making mistakes while pushing the car to its limit. One of the biggest frustrations for drivers was the difficulty of finding clean air. At a track like New Hampshire, being behind another car can completely change the handling of your vehicle. The balance can shift, the front end can become less responsive, and suddenly a driver who looked fast a few laps earlier can struggle to make the same move. That's why track position became so important. Drivers who could maintain clean air had a major advantage, while those caught in traffic had to be patient and search for opportunities. Then came the restarts. Restarts at New Hampshire can completely change the race. One moment, a driver can be comfortably running inside the top 10. The next moment, they're surrounded by cars fighting for position. The pressure increases, the gaps disappear, and every driver has to make decisions almost instantly. Several post-race conversations centered around those moments. Drivers discussed how important it was to get a good launch, choose the right lane, and survive the first few corners without losing momentum. But not everyone left the track happy. For some drivers, the race represented a missed opportunity. A car that appeared capable of running near the front may have been hurt by a poor restart, an unfavorable pit stop sequence, traffic, or a handling issue. That's one of the hardest parts of NASCAR. You can have a fast race car and still leave disappointed. A small mistake can turn a potential top 5 finish into a frustrating result. And that's exactly why post-race reactions are so interesting. You get to hear what the drivers really thought about their performance. For the drivers who finished near the front, the mood was naturally very different. Their focus was on execution. They talked about communication with their teams, the importance of making the right adjustments, and how every member of the organization contributed to the result. A strong NASCAR finish isn't just about the driver. It's about the crew chief. It's about the pit crew. It's about engineers. It's about everyone working together for several hours to produce a competitive car. And at New Hampshire, that teamwork was especially important. Another major topic was the changing track conditions. As the race progressed, the track continued to evolve. Grip levels changed, the balance of the cars changed, and drivers had to adapt. A setup that worked early in the race wasn't necessarily the setup that worked later. This forced teams to make adjustments throughout the event. Drivers described the importance of giving accurate feedback. When a driver tells the crew chief that the car is too loose, too tight, lacking rear grip, or struggling in the center of the corner, the team has to translate that feedback into actual changes. Sometimes those changes work immediately. Sometimes they don't. And sometimes the driver has to adapt to the car instead. That's what makes the driver-team relationship so important. One driver who struggled during the race may have felt the car was simply not responding the way the team expected. After the race, that driver could point to the handling balance as one of the biggest problems. Another driver may have been happy with the car, but disappointed by track position. And another may have believed the team had the right strategy, but simply didn't get the final restart they needed. These differences make every post-race reaction unique. Then there was the question of aggression. How hard should a driver race at New Hampshire? That's always a difficult question. If you attack too aggressively, you can destroy your tires. If you wait too long, the opportunity may disappear. Drivers constantly have to calculate risk versus reward. That was especially obvious during the late stages. With positions becoming more valuable, drivers had to decide when it was time to attack. Some made aggressive moves, others chose patience, and sometimes the driver who waited ended up being the one who benefited. Another major story was the battle for championship points. Every NASCAR Cup Series race matters. A strong finish can provide momentum and valuable points. A bad result can create pressure heading into the next event. That's why some drivers weren't only thinking about winning. They were thinking about the championship picture. They wanted to gain positions. They wanted to avoid unnecessary damage. And they wanted to leave New Hampshire with as many points as possible. For drivers who had a difficult day, the message afterward was often about moving forward. That's an important part of NASCAR. You don't have much time to feel sorry for yourself. The next race is already coming. Teams have to unload at the next track with a completely different challenge. So even when a driver is disappointed, the focus quickly turns toward improvement. What can we fix? What did we learn? What can we do better next weekend? Those questions are often more important than the result itself. For the drivers who had a strong day, however, New Hampshire can provide something equally valuable: confidence. A good result proves that the team can execute under pressure. It shows that the car is competitive, and it gives the entire organization momentum. The post-race comments also highlighted just how physically demanding these races can be. Drivers spend hours inside a race car, dealing with heat, vibration, pressure, and constant concentration. Even when the racing looks smooth from the outside, the workload inside the cockpit is enormous. Every corner requires precision. Every restart requires concentration. And every battle requires awareness of the cars around you. That's why finishing the race cleanly is already an accomplishment. But finishing near the front requires another level of performance. The drivers who came away satisfied from New Hampshire weren't necessarily the ones who had the fastest car every single lap. They were the ones who executed when it mattered. They managed their tires. They avoided major mistakes. They communicated effectively with their teams. And when the opportunity came, they took it. Meanwhile, the drivers who left disappointed will now have to study the race carefully. NASCAR teams don't simply forget a difficult afternoon. They go through the data. They watch the onboard footage. They analyze pit stops. They compare setup changes. And they try to understand exactly where they lost time. That's how teams improve. And that's why every race, even a frustrating one, can provide valuable information. The New Hampshire race also showed once again why NASCAR remains unpredictable. A driver can look dominant one moment and struggle after a restart. A mid-pack car can suddenly become a contender with the right strategy. And a single mistake can completely change the finishing order. That's what keeps fans watching until the final lap. As the drivers left New Hampshire, the emotions were mixed. Some were celebrating. Some were frustrated. Some were asking what could have been. And others were already thinking about the next race. But one thing was clear. Every driver took something away from this race. For some, it was confidence. For others, it was motivation. And for a few, it was a reminder that there is still plenty of work to do. The biggest takeaway from the post-race reactions is simple. At this level of NASCAR, speed alone isn't enough. You need strategy. You need patience. You need communication. You need execution. And sometimes you need a little bit of luck. New Hampshire tested all of those qualities. It tested the drivers. It tested the teams. and it tested the patience of everyone involved. Now the question is what happens next? Can the drivers who struggled at New Hampshire bounce back? Can the teams that found speed carry that momentum into the next race? And can the championship contenders continue to build their advantage? That's what makes the rest of the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season so exciting. Every race creates a new storyline. Every finish changes the momentum. And every driver has another chance to prove themselves. So, what did you think about the New Hampshire race? Which driver impressed you the most? And whose post-race reaction surprised you? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this NASCAR breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next NASCAR Cup Series update. We'll be back with more race reactions, driver comments, highlights, drama, and the biggest stories from the 2026 NASCAR season. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the next race.